Maria Thompson had always been the kind of person who put others before herself. For over a decade, she had worked as a nurse in one of the busiest hospitals in the city. Her days were long, her nights even longer, and her life revolved around caring for patients who often came to her at their most vulnerable moments. She loved her job, not because it was easy, but because it gave her purpose. Every smile from a patient recovering after surgery, every sigh of relief from a family member when they heard good news, it all made the exhaustion worth it. But lately, things had changed. The hospital where Maria worked wasn't what it used to be. Budget cuts had become a regular topic of conversation among the staff. Nurses were stretched thin, forced to handle more patients than ever before with fewer resources. Maria tried her best to keep up, but the strain was taking its toll. She barely had time to eat during her shifts, let alone sit down and catch her breath. Still, she pushed through, telling herself that this was just a phase, that things would get better eventually. Unfortunately, better never came. One Friday afternoon, Maria received an email summoning her to a meeting with the hospital administration. Her heart sank as soon as she read it. Something about the tone of the message felt off, like bad news wrapped in polite language. When she walked into the conference room later that day, she found two senior managers waiting for her. Their expressions confirmed her worst fears. "Maria," one of them began, his voice calm but firm, "we've had to make some difficult decisions recently due to budget constraints. We value everything you've done for this hospital, but unfortunately, we have no choice but to let you go." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Let go? After all these years? Maria opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The room seemed to spin around her as reality crashed down. How could this happen? She had given so much of herself to this place, to the people here. And now, just like that, it was over. She left the hospital that evening carrying a box filled with her personal belongings, a few pens, a tattered notebook, a coffee mug with a faded motivational quote printed on it. Outside, the streets were bustling with activity, cars honking, people chatting, life moving forward as if nothing had changed. But inside, Maria felt like her world had stopped spinning. Walking home felt surreal, each step heavier than the last. By the time she reached her apartment, tears were streaming down her face. Her small apartment greeted her with silence. It wasn't fancy, just a one-bedroom space with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards, but it was hers. Or at least it had been until now. Sitting on the couch, she stared blankly at the stack of bills piled high on her kitchen counter. Rent, utilities, groceries, student loans, they loomed over her like storm clouds ready to burst. Without a steady income, how would she manage? For hours, Maria sat there lost in thought. Memories flooded her mind. Late-night study sessions in nursing school, the first time she held a newborn baby in her arms, the countless times she'd stayed late at the hospital to comfort grieving families. All those moments had shaped her into the person she was today. Nursing wasn't just a career for her, it was her identity. Now, stripped of that identity, she felt like a ship without a compass, adrift in uncharted waters. As night fell, Maria tried to distract herself by flipping through old photo albums. There was a picture of her graduating from nursing school, her parents beaming with pride beside her. Another showed her posing with colleagues at a holiday party, everyone laughing and holding glasses of sparkling cider. These images reminded her of happier times, but they also stung. Would she ever feel that sense of fulfillment again? Despite the overwhelming despair, something deep inside Maria refused to give up. Beneath the sadness and fear, there was still a spark, a quiet determination that had carried her through tough times before. She might not know what tomorrow held, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't stop being who she was. Even if she wasn't wearing a nurse's uniform anymore, her instinct to care for others wouldn't fade. It was part of her DNA, woven into the fabric of her soul. That night, as Maria lay awake staring at the ceiling, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter how hard things got, she wouldn't let bitterness or resentment consume her. Life had thrown her a curveball, but she would find a way to swing back. Little did she know, the very qualities that made her such a remarkable nurse would soon lead her to an extraordinary twist of fate, one that would change her life forever. The next morning, Maria woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her mind had been racing with worries throughout the night, about bills, her future, and how she'd explain to her family that she'd lost her job. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She decided she needed some fresh air to clear her head. Pulling on a light jacket, she stepped outside and started walking toward the park near her apartment. It was a crisp autumn day, the kind where the leaves crunched underfoot and the air carried just enough chill to wake you up. Maria walked slowly, her hands shoved deep into her pockets, trying not to think about anything too heavy. She let the rhythm of her footsteps guide her, watching as families played with their kids, joggers zipped past, and dogs tugged excitedly at their leashes. For a brief moment, she felt a flicker of peace. But then in the distance, she heard something, a commotion coming from one of the benches near the pond. At first, she thought maybe someone had dropped something or tripped. But as she drew closer, she realized it was more serious than that. A small crowd had gathered around a man lying motionless on the ground. People were shouting, "Call 911 and does anyone know CPR?" Maria's heart skipped a beat. Without thinking twice, she pushed through the crowd. When she reached the center, she saw an elderly man sprawled on the bench, his face pale, and his lips tinged blue. His breathing was shallow, almost non-existent. Instinct kicked in immediately. This wasn't just another passerby witnessing an accident. This was Maria, the nurse who had spent years saving lives. Even though she didn't have her scrubs on or a hospital ID badge clipped to her shirt, she knew exactly what to do. Kneeling beside the man, Maria checked for a pulse. It was weak, erratic. She tilted his head back gently to open his airway and began performing chest compressions. 1, 2, 3. Each push was firm and deliberate, her hands moving with practiced precision. Someone in the crowd handed her a scarf to use as padding under his neck, while another person held his phone out to time the compressions. Maria worked quickly, counting aloud to keep track of the rhythm. "Come on, stay with me," she muttered, under her breath, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. After 30 compressions, she tilted his chin again and gave him rescue breaths, sealing her mouth over his to force air into his lungs. The seconds felt like hours, each moment stretching endlessly as she fought to keep him alive. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she didn't stop, not once. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the man gasped, a sharp intake of air that sent a wave of relief crashing over Maria. He was still unconscious, but he was breathing again. Just then, the distant wail of sirens cut through the air. Paramedics arrived within minutes, rushing to take over. They strapped an oxygen mask to his face, hooked him up to monitors, and loaded him onto a stretcher. As they prepared to leave, one of the paramedics turned to Maria. "You saved his life," he said, his tone filled with admiration. "If you hadn't acted so fast, we might not have been able to help him." Maria nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she watched silently as the ambulance sped away, its lights flashing against the gray sky. Only when it disappeared from sight did she realize how much energy she'd expended. Her arms ached, her legs felt shaky, and her entire body trembled with exhaustion. But beneath it all, there was a strange sense of satisfaction. Despite everything she'd been through lately, she'd made a difference today. She'd done what she was born to do. As the crowd dispersed, a young woman approached Maria hesitantly. She looked nervous, twisting her fingers together as she spoke. "Excuse me," she said softly, "but are you okay? That was incredible what you just did." Maria managed a small smile. "I'm fine," she replied. "Just glad I could help." The woman introduced herself as Emily, explaining that the man was her grandfather. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thanked Maria repeatedly. "He means everything to me," Emily said, her voice breaking. "If you hadn't been here—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Maria placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "He's strong," she said. "He'll pull through." For a few more minutes, they stood there talking. Emily shared bits and pieces about her grandfather, how he loved fishing, how he always told funny stories at family gatherings, how stubborn he could be sometimes. Listening to her talk, Maria couldn't help but feel a connection. It reminded her of why she became a nurse in the first place, to make moments like this possible, to give people more time with the ones they loved. Eventually, Emily left to follow the ambulance to the hospital, promising to update Maria on her grandfather's condition. Alone once again, Maria took a deep breath and glanced around the park. Everything seemed quieter now, almost peaceful. The chaos of earlier had faded, leaving behind a lingering sense of purpose. For the first time in days, Maria felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe losing her job didn't mean losing herself. Maybe, even without a title or a paycheck, she could still make an impact. With that thought in mind, she started walking back home, her steps lighter than before. She didn't know it yet, but her act of kindness that morning would set off a chain reaction, one that would change her life in ways she never could have imagined. The hospital corridors were quiet when Emily arrived, her heart pounding as she rushed to the emergency room. Her grandfather, Richard Langston, had been stabilized, but he was still unconscious. The doctors assured her that his condition was critical, but not hopeless. As she sat by his bedside, clutching his hand tightly, she replayed the events of the morning in her mind. That stranger, Maria, had saved his life. Without her quick thinking and expertise, Richard might not have made it. Hours passed before Richard finally stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment he looked disoriented. Then recognition dawned on his face as he saw Emily sitting beside him. "Emily," he rasped, his voice weak but warm. "What happened?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she leaned closer. "You collapsed at the park, Grandpa. Someone saved you. She performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. You're going to be okay." Richard frowned slightly, trying to piece together the fragments of memory. "Who was it? Do we know who helped me?" Emily nodded. "Her name is Maria. She stayed with you until the ambulance came. I meant to ask her more, but everything happened so fast. She seemed incredible." Richard's expression softened, a mix of gratitude and curiosity lighting up his features. "We need to find her," he said firmly, despite his frailty. "I owe her my life." Later that day, after undergoing tests and being moved to a private room, Richard insisted on learning more about Maria. He asked Emily to contact the hospital staff to see if they had any information about the woman who had intervened. To his relief, the paramedics confirmed that Maria had provided them with her contact details before leaving the scene. They handed over her phone number, along with a brief description of how calmly and efficiently she had handled the situation. Richard picked up the phone himself, determined to speak to Maria personally. When she answered, her voice sounded hesitant, almost shy. "Hello? Ms. Thompson?" Richard began, his tone warm yet formal. "This is Richard Langston, the man you saved today. I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart." Maria froze for a second, unsure of what to say. "Oh, Mr. Langston, I'm so glad you're doing better. It was nothing, really. Anyone would have done the same." No, Richard interrupted gently. "Not everyone would have acted as bravely or skillfully as you did. Please allow me to express my gratitude properly. Can we meet? I'd love to hear your story, and perhaps repay you in some small way for what you've done." Maria hesitated. She wasn't used to people offering repayment for acts of kindness. In fact, helping others had always been its own reward for her. But something about Richard's sincerity struck a chord. Reluctantly, she agreed to meet him the next day at the hospital cafe. When Maria walked into the cafe the following afternoon, she immediately spotted Richard sitting at a corner table. Despite his recent ordeal, he looked remarkably composed, dressed neatly in a sweater and slacks. His sharp blue eyes locked onto hers as she approached, and he stood up to greet her with a wide smile. "Ms. Thompson," he said warmly, extending his hand, "thank you for coming." Maria shook his hand, feeling oddly self-conscious. "Please call me Maria. And honestly, there's no need for this. I was just doing what anyone else would have done. Richard chuckled softly as he gestured for her to sit. Perhaps, but not everyone does. That's why I wanted to meet you, to understand what drives someone like you to act so selflessly. As they settled into their seats, Maria found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. Richard was easy to talk to, his demeanor kind and genuine. He listened intently as she shared snippets of her life, her passion for nursing, the challenges of working in a high-pressure environment, and most recently, the devastating blow of losing her job. I poured my heart into that hospital, Maria admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. But now I don't even know where to start looking for work again, or if I'll even find anything stable enough to cover my bills. Richard studied her carefully, sensing the depth of her struggle beneath her composed exterior. It's unfair, he said finally. People like you deserve better. You've dedicated your life to helping others, and yet here you are, facing such hardship. Maria shrugged, forcing a weak smile. Life isn't fair sometimes, but I'll figure it out, I always do. Richard nodded thoughtfully, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with her response. For the rest of their conversation, he steered the topic toward lighter subjects, asking about her hobbies, her family, and her dreams for the future. By the time they parted ways, Maria felt a strange sense of connection to this man she barely knew, a bond forged not just by his near-death experience, but by his genuine interest in her well-being. That evening, as Richard lay in bed reflecting on their meeting, he couldn't shake the image of Maria's tired yet resilient face. There was something profoundly admirable about her, a quiet strength that reminded him of his younger days, when he'd faced countless obstacles while building his tech company. He admired her humility, her refusal to dwell on her misfortunes, and her unwavering commitment to helping others even when she herself was struggling. But admiration wasn't enough. Richard believed strongly in the power of gratitude, not just his words but his action. Sitting up in bed, he grabbed a notepad and began jotting down ideas. If Maria had given him a second chance at life, then he owed it to her to give her a fresh start in return. And as a man who had spent decades turning ideas into reality, Richard knew exactly how to make that happen. Unbeknownst to Maria, her simple act of kindness was about to transform not only Richard's life, but hers as well. The next morning, Maria woke up feeling a little lighter than she had in days. Her meeting with Richard Langston had been unexpected, a rare moment of human connection in what had otherwise felt like a lonely and overwhelming period of her life. Though they had only talked for an hour, his kindness and genuine interest in her story had left a lasting impression on her. For the first time since losing her job, she allowed herself to entertain the faintest glimmer of hope that things might eventually work out. She spent the day tidying up her apartment, catching up on laundry, and attempting to organize her thoughts. The pile of bills on her kitchen counter still loomed over her, but she pushed those worries aside, determined to focus on small victories instead. Around noon, she decided to take another walk through the park, retracing the path where she had saved Richard's life just 2 days earlier. The crisp autumn air helped clear her mind, and for a brief moment she let herself imagine a future where she could find stability again, perhaps even joy. When she returned home, however, reality came rushing back. As she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, she noticed a group of people gathered near her door. At first, she thought maybe there was some sort of maintenance issue or delivery mix-up, but as she drew closer, her confusion deepened. 4 men in uniform stood outside her apartment, each holding a clipboard and a set of car keys. Behind them, parked neatly along the curb, were 4 gleaming luxury vehicles, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz, a shiny silver BMW, a futuristic Tesla, Model S, and a rugged Range Rover. Maria stopped in her tracks, staring at the scene before her. Her heart raced as one of the men approached her with a warm smile. "Are you Maria Thompson?" he asked politely. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. What is all this?" The man gestured toward the cars. "These are for you, ma'am. Mr. Langston sent them as a token of his gratitude." "For me?" Maria's eyes widened in disbelief, She looked from the cars to the delivery men, then back again, certain she must be dreaming. I don't understand. Why would he send me cars? This has to be some kind of mistake. No mistake, ma'am, another delivery man chimed in. Mr. Langston specifically requested that these be delivered to you today. He included notes inside each vehicle explaining everything. Maria hesitated, unsure of how to process what was happening. Slowly, she walked over to the nearest car, the Mercedes, and peered inside. Sure enough, tucked under the windshield wiper was an envelope addressed to her in elegant handwriting. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling as she unfolded the letter inside. Dear Maria, when I was lying unconscious in the park, my life hanging by a thread, you didn't hesitate to step in and save me. Your actions weren't just heroic, they were selfless, especially given the challenges you're facing in your own life. I've thought long and hard about how I can repay you, and while no gift could ever truly match the value of what you've done, I hope this gesture will bring some ease to your burdens. Each of these cars represents something different: freedom, opportunity, security, and adventure. They are yours to keep, to use however you see fit. Whether you choose to sell them, drive them, or share them with others, I trust that you'll make the best decision for yourself and those around you. You deserve nothing less than the world, Maria, and I'm honored to play a small part in helping you move forward. With deepest gratitude, Richard Maria read the letter twice, her vision blurring with tears. She couldn't believe what she was holding in her hands or what awaited her outside. The weight of Richard's generosity hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless. How could someone she barely knew show her such kindness? And why did he feel compelled to give her so much? One by one, she inspected the other cars, finding similar notes tucked beneath their windshield wipers. Each message reinforced Richard's gratitude, emphasizing how much her actions had meant to him. By the time she reached the last car, she was overwhelmed, not just by the sheer extravagance of the gifts, but by the thoughtfulness behind them. These weren't random tokens. They were carefully chosen symbols of hope and possibility. Neighbors began peeking out of their windows and doors, curious about the commotion. Some recognized Maria and offered congratulations, while others simply stared in awe at the sight. Of 4 luxury vehicles lined up outside her modest building, Maria felt exposed, unsure of how to explain any of this to people who barely knew her. All she wanted was to retreat into her apartment and process everything privately. But before she could slip away, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Richard. I hope you like the surprise. Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything else I can do to help. Maria stared at the screen, torn between gratitude and guilt. On one hand, she was deeply moved by Richard's generosity. On the other, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't deserve such lavish gifts. After all, she hadn't saved his life expecting anything in return. Yet here she was, standing in front of 4 cars worth more than she'd earned in years. That night, Maria sat alone in her living room, staring at the stack of letters spread across her coffee table. Her mind raced with questions. What was she supposed to do with all of this? Should she sell the cars and use the money to pay off her debts? Or should she keep one and donate the rest to charity? The possibilities swirled endlessly, each option accompanied by its own set of emotions. Despite her uncertainty, one thing became clear. Richard's gift wasn't just about material wealth. It was about restoring her faith in humanity, reminding her that good deeds, even small ones, could ripple outward in ways she never imagined. For the first time in weeks, Maria allowed herself to dream again. Maybe losing her job wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning of something new, something extraordinary. As she drifted off to sleep, her final thought was simple, yet profound. Kindness always finds a way to circle back. The news of Maria's incredible act of kindness and the astonishing reward that followed spread like wildfire. Within days, local reporters caught wind of the story and descended upon her quiet neighborhood. At first, Maria tried to avoid the attention, keeping her curtains drawn and avoiding phone calls from unknown numbers. But as the story gained traction online and in newspapers, it became impossible to stay out of the spotlight. Friends and acquaintances began reaching out, congratulating her and expressing pride in what she had done. Strangers left messages on social media, calling her a real-life hero and praising Richard Langston for his generosity. Eventually, Maria agreed to sit down for an interview with a local television station. She knew the public interest wasn't going away anytime soon, and she figured if people were already talking about her, she might as well tell her side of the story. Sitting under the bright studio lights, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, Maria spoke candidly about the events leading up to that fateful morning in the park. She recounted how losing her job had left her feeling defeated, but also how saving Richard's life reminded her why she became a nurse in the first place. "I didn't do it for recognition or reward," Maria said during the interview, her voice steady despite the cameras pointed at her. "I did it because it's who I am. Helping others is what I've always done. It's what I'll always do." Her words resonated deeply with viewers, many of whom saw her humility and selflessness as a refreshing contrast to the often chaotic and divisive world around them. The interview aired during prime time, and by the next day Maria's story had gone viral. Messages poured in from across the country, people sharing their own struggles, thanking her for inspiring them, and even offering support in various forms. One woman sent her handmade scarves along with a note saying, "For when you need warmth." Another offered free legal advice, while a retired doctor mailed her a book titled, "How to Stay Strong Through Life's Challenges." Amidst the flood of goodwill, professional opportunities began presenting themselves. Several hospitals and healthcare organizations reached out, eager to hire someone with Maria's experience and character. A private clinic specializing in underserved communities extended an offer that particularly caught her eye. They promised flexibility, competitive pay, and the chance to make a meaningful impact on patients' lives. It felt like fate knocking at her door, and after careful consideration, Maria accepted the position. For the first time since being let go from her previous job, she felt hopeful about her career again. With her financial burdens eased by Richard's generous gift, Maria decided to use her newfound resources wisely. Selling 3 of the luxury cars allowed her to pay off her debts, invest in her future, and create something bigger than herself: a scholarship fund for aspiring nurses. Growing up, Maria had faced countless obstacles while pursuing her education, including working multiple jobs to afford tuition. She wanted to ensure that no one else would have to struggle the way she did. She named the scholarship fund Heart and Hands, inspired by the idea that nursing is as much about compassion as it is about skill. The program provided financial assistance to students from low-income backgrounds, covering everything from textbooks to housing costs. In its first year alone, Heart and Hands supported 10 students, each of whom wrote heartfelt letters to Maria expressing their gratitude. Reading those letters filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. In addition to launching the scholarship fund, Maria partnered with local charities to provide free medical care to underserved populations. Every Saturday, she volunteered at a community health clinic, offering checkups, vaccinations, and advice to families who couldn't afford regular health care. Word of her efforts spread quickly, drawing volunteers and donors who shared her vision of accessible, compassionate care for all. Together, they transformed the clinic into a hub of hope and healing, serving hundreds of patients each month. Richard remained a constant presence in Maria's life, checking in regularly to see how she was doing. Their initial meeting had sparked a friendship that grew stronger with time. He admired her resilience and determination, often referring to her as the embodiment of grace under pressure. In turn, Maria appreciated his wisdom and generosity, viewing him not just as a benefactor but as a mentor and confidant. One afternoon, over coffee at a cozy cafe downtown, Richard broached the subject of expanding Maria's charitable work. "You've accomplished so much already," he said, stirring sugar into his cup. "But imagine what you could achieve with more resources. Let me help you take this to the next level." Maria hesitated, unsure of whether accepting further help would feel right. "I don't want to rely too heavily on your generosity, Richard. You've already done so much." He waved her concern away with a smile. "Nonsense, this isn't about reliance, it's about partnership. Besides, you inspire me to be better. to give back in ways I never thought possible. Consider it my way of paying forward the kindness you showed me." Touched by his sincerity, Maria agreed to collaborate with him. With Richard's financial backing and strategic guidance, she launched a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving access to healthcare in marginalized communities. The initiative included mobile clinics, educational workshops, and advocacy campaigns aimed at addressing systemic inequities in the healthcare system. Within months, the organization gained national attention, earning praise from policymakers, activists, and everyday citizens alike. As Maria stood on stage at the grand opening of the nonprofit's headquarters, surrounded by supporters and beneficiaries, she reflected on how far she'd come. Just months ago, she had been sitting alone in her apartment, overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. Now she was standing tall, leading a movement that was changing lives, including her own. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, gratitude, and the power of human connection. Saving Richard's life had set off a chain reaction that not only restored her faith in herself, but also reminded her of the profound impact one person can have on the world. And though the 4 luxury cars had been an extraordinary gift, the true treasure lay in the relationship she'd built and the legacy she was creating. Looking out at the crowd gathered before her, Maria smiled warmly. "This isn't just my story," she said into the microphone. "It belongs to all of us, to everyone who believes in the power of kindness, compassion, and second chances. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Together we can build a brighter future for everyone." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing through the room like a promise kept. Maria knew then that her work was far from over, but she also knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Maria's journey didn't end with the launch of her nonprofit organization. If anything, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by growth, collaboration, and an unwavering commitment to making a difference. Over the months that followed, she poured her energy into expanding the nonprofit's reach, ensuring that its services were accessible to as many people as possible. Mobile clinics became a cornerstone of the initiative, traveling to remote areas where healthcare was scarce or non-existent. These clinics weren't just about treating illnesses. They were about building trust within communities, showing people that someone cared enough to show up. The impact was immediate and profound. Families who had gone years without proper medical attention finally received the care they needed. Children who once suffered silently from preventable conditions now had access to vaccines and treatments. Pregnant women, previously forced to navigate dangerous pregnancies alone, could now attend prenatal checkups and deliver their babies safely. Each success story fueled Maria's determination to keep pushing forward, reminding her why she had dedicated her life to nursing in the first place. One particularly memorable case involved a young boy named Elijah. His mother brought him to one of the mobile clinics after noticing he was losing weight and struggling to breathe. The doctors diagnosed him with asthma, a condition that, if left untreated, could have been fatal. Thanks to the clinic's intervention, Elijah received medication and a treatment plan tailored to his needs. A few weeks later, when Maria visited the community again, she saw Elijah playing outside with other children, laughing and running freely. His mother approached her, tears streaming down her face, and thanked her repeatedly for giving her son a second chance at life. Stories like Elijah's reminded Maria that every act of kindness, no matter how small, had the potential to create ripples far beyond what anyone could predict. It wasn't just about saving lives, it was about restoring hope, dignity, and faith in humanity. And while Maria remained humble about her role in all of this, those around her couldn't help but see her as a beacon of light, a symbol of resilience and compassion in a world that often felt dark and chaotic. Richard continued to play an integral part in Maria's efforts, using his experience as a successful entrepreneur to guide the nonprofit's operations. Together, they brainstormed innovative ways to tackle systemic issues in healthcare, such as lobbying for policy changes and partnering with schools to educate students about health and wellness. Richard also introduced Maria to influential figures in the philanthropic world, opening doors she never imagined existed. Through these connections, the nonprofit secured additional funding, allowing it to expand its programs and hire more staff. Despite his wealth and accomplishments, Richard found himself profoundly changed by his friendship with Maria. Her selflessness and dedication inspired him to reevaluate his own priorities. He began volunteering alongside her at the clinics, surprising everyone, including himself, with how much joy he derived from serving others. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, as though he had rediscovered a part of himself he thought he'd lost long ago. Their partnership blossomed into something deeper, a shared mission to leave the world better than they found it. They became inseparable, not just as collaborators but as friends who genuinely admired and respected each other. People often remarked on how well they worked together, joking that they were like two sides of the same coin. While Maria brought empathy and hands-on expertise to the table, Richard contributed strategic thinking and resources. Together, they formed a dynamic duo capable of achieving incredible things. As word of their work spread, invitations to speak at conferences and events began pouring in. At first, Maria hesitated, feeling uncomfortable in the spotlight. But Richard encouraged her to embrace the opportunity, pointing out that sharing their story could inspire others to take action. Reluctantly, she agreed, and soon she found herself standing before packed auditoriums, recounting her journey from losing her job to founding a nonprofit that touched thousands of lives. Her speeches resonated deeply with audiences, many of whom were moved to tears by her authenticity and vulnerability. She spoke openly about the challenges she faced, the fear, the doubt, the moments when she wondered if she would ever find her footing again. But she also emphasized the importance of perseverance, reminding listeners that even in the darkest times, there is always a glimmer of hope waiting to be discovered. Kindness doesn't require money or fame, Maria would say during her talks. It requires only a willingness to see the humanity in others and to act on behalf of that humanity. Sometimes the smallest gestures can lead to the biggest transformations, not just in someone else's life, but in your own. Her message struck a chord with people from all walks of life, sparking conversations about the power of compassion and the ripple effect of good deeds. Schools incorporated her story into their curriculums, teaching students the value of helping others without expecting anything in return. Corporations invited her to lead workshops on workplace empathy, encouraging employees to prioritize kindness in their daily interactions. Even politicians cited her work as an example of grassroots activism done right. Back home, Maria continued to balance her roles as a nurse, nonprofit leader, and advocate. Despite her growing responsibilities, she made time for the little things. That brought her joy. Baking cookies for her neighbors, taking long walks through the park, and mentoring young nurses eager to learn from her experiences. She cherished these moments, knowing they grounded her and kept her connected to the values that had guided her throughout her life. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Richard joined her, holding 2 cups of tea. "You've come a long way, Maria," he said softly, handing her one of the cups. "Do you ever stop to think about how much has changed since that day in the park?" Maria smiled, sipping her tea slowly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But honestly, I try not to dwell on it too much. Life is full of surprises. You never know what tomorrow will bring." Richard chuckled. "That's true. Still, it's remarkable how one decision, to step in and save my life, set off such a chain reaction. You've inspired so many people, including me." "I think we've inspired each other," Maria replied, meeting his gaze. "You've taught me that gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's an action. And I hope I've shown you that no matter where you are in life, there's always room to give back." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky turned shades of orange and pink. In that moment, neither of them needed to say anything more. They both knew they had found something rare and precious, a friendship built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and an unshakable belief in the goodness of humanity. Years later, when people looked back on Maria's story, they didn't just see a woman who saved a man's life or received 4 luxury cars as a reward. They saw a testament to the transformative power of kindness. A reminder that even in the face of adversity, acts of compassion can spark change far greater than anyone could imagine. Maria and Richard proved that generosity wasn't limited to material gifts. It extended to time, effort, and love poured into making the world a better place. And so, Maria's legacy lived on, not in trophies or accolades, but in the countless lives she touched and the ripple effects of her actions. Whether it was a child breathing easier because of a mobile clinic, a student pursuing their dream of becoming a nurse thanks to her scholarship fund, or a stranger inspired to perform their own act of kindness, Maria's influence reached far and wide. For Maria, the greatest reward wasn't the cars, the recognition, or even the success of her nonprofit. It was knowing that she had stayed true to herself, that despite everything she had endured, she had never stopped being the person she was meant to be, a helper, a healer, and a force for good in the world.